Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss the SNP's move to prepare a second independence referendum bill, as well as the moves for former leader Alex Salmond to form a second pro-independence party in order, he says, to increase the number of pro-independence MSPs at this year's Scottish elections. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news in politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So this is going to go all over the place, really. It's going to be increasingly relevant, the Scottish politics, to the whole of the UK because of the Scottish elections, which will have, just like the general elections of the UK, the last couple of general elections, we say certainly the last two, maybe even three, and the Brexit referendum, could have a major impact on the future direction of the whole of the UK. And I could have done this in two topics, really, but let's go for it. So I'm going to do this in a few parts. So the new party first. Alex Salmond has been talking about the new Alba Party, Alba being, Scotland in, well, Scottish. Now, although this has been likened to a sort of Brexit party attempt to harden the line of the SNP in the same way that Farage's mob hardened the line of the Conservative Party, it won't actually work like that as far as I can see. That being said, there are a couple of ways to look at this new venture. Now, I'm going to be charitable and look at it from the way it's intended, first of all, and then we'll take the cynical look at it, which is possibly nearer to the mark. So, with a Westminster mindset, you can look at the idea of, oh, another party is forming, pro-independence, it's therefore going to be in opposite, competing with the SNP, and it's going to take votes away from the SNP, making it harder for the SNP to get a majority and all the rest of it. Now, in this case, that isn't the intention. It's certainly not the stated intention, and it's not necessarily what would happen. So the Scottish Parliament elects members in two ways. Most are elected using the archaic first past the post system. Whenever sort of we look at the different electoral systems around the UK, Westminster is the worst because it's all first past the post, but it has to be said the others are not proper proportional representation either. This is the same first past the post system that has knackered British politics for a decade. It means that a party can gain a majority and therefore 100% of the power with less than even half of the votes. But there we go. But a certain proportion, at least in the Scottish Parliament, are elected in a form of proportional representation. It's a minority of MSPs, but still it's better than nothing. Now, Salmond made the point that there were 1 million people voted for the SNP at the last election who didn't basically contribute to electing any SNP or MSPs, but we'll say MPs for now. We'll talk about the Scottish Parliament, we know what we mean. Now, I don't know if that's true. I've not necessarily any reason to doubt the statement as such. So the point he's trying to make is that there are pro-independence votes out there that are basically wasted at the moment. And the intention for this new party is not to stand candidates for the first past the post system, where they definitely would be splitting the vote, but the additional member ballots. In this way, Salmond intends to create what he calls a supermajority in the Scottish Parliament. That is a large majority of MSPs in favour of Scottish independence. Now, as things currently stand, the elections look to be on a bit of a knife edge. The SNP will form the government, of course. No one's suggesting they're going to do worse than they did in the last elections. There's no doubt that they will be the most successful party. They'll get the most MSPs. But will it be enough to gain a majority, or will they continue as a minority government? If they do get a majority, it's believed that it will be a slender majority only. Basically, the way it's looking is they'll either just about get a majority or be very close to a majority but still a minority. And so in terms of what will happen, it'll be the difference between an MSP or so, but politically the result will be massive. It's huge. It's a little bit like you can have 0.1% growth in your economy and you call it growth, and you can have a 0.1% contraction in your economy. If it lasts for half a year, you call it a recession. And the difference between growth and recession is massive when it's blown out in the media, but the difference is very small. Now, if they fail to get that majority, then they fail to make the case for another referendum. They'll obviously still proceed, of course, but it's a harder sell. Get the majority, and it's the other way around. They claim a mandate for their central policy aim. Fair enough. And such a party could potentially help that. A party that could, soak up some of the votes and create more pro-independence MSPs could absolutely help that, because the more of a majority there is in the Parliament for pro-independence, the stronger the case you make. Now, I can see the situation descending into a little bit of a farce at some point, I have to say. But I don't necessarily think that matters to those supporting the project. For example, the party has been set up very late in the day. When I was reading into this, which is now a couple of days ago, they didn't even have candidates for all the regions yet. I don't know if they do now. See, they were in a bit of a rush to beat the deadline, because I think that deadline may have actually passed now. And we all know what it means when you get candidates hastily selected like this. We've seen it before. You get some right nutters because you haven't carried out your vetting process properly. So you get some proper nutters whose skeletons will come bounding out of the closet very shortly after the election, should they be successful. That being said, doesn't necessarily matter, does it? Because if they end up with a load of embarrassing nutters as well, you can argue, does it matter? The purpose will be to get that clear majority. They'll ride out any scandals. After all, the party is being led by a very scandal-battered politician, which is where we sort of come into the cynical view. At the end of the day, this isn't a party it's not a carefully laid out plan, is it? Let's be honest. If it were, it would have been begun in plenty of time ahead of the elections. These elections haven't just sprung up. It's not like the 2019 or 2017 general elections in the UK that just happened. It's like, what? Oh, we're having an election now. That wasn't planned. These have been planned for some time. You would set the party up last year, not a few days before the deadline for registrations. So you can look at this venture as, if you wanted to be cynical, and I quite often want to be cynical, you can look at it as a man who hasn't enjoyed being seen as a has-been. Alex Salmond, I mean, for all people will say about him, he was a superb political leader. There's no doubt about that. And he maybe doesn't like the fact that he is now seen as being in the shadow of other people he may see as below him. He has no route back to political relevance in the SNP. So what does any politician do when they want to enjoy the high life again? This has happened time and again. You start another party. And if you go with the view that this new party isn't intended to complement the SNP in its pro-independence moves, that's just an intended side effect, but it's to cream off supporters who think that Sturgeon isn't aggressive enough in order to feed the ego of someone who was a good political leader, but who is not enjoying retirement from the cut and thrust, then you may also come to the view that it's going to end up being a right cock-up. But if the elections go as expected, then with or without the bonus of a few extra Alba Party MSPs, the SNP government clearly expects to proceed with an independence referendum. Now, the Scottish government have published a draft bill for such a vote. It was reported that Ian Blackford, who is the leader of the SNP in Westminster, I sometimes discuss his questions, well, quite often discuss his questions in my weekly PMQs video, would want the vote to take place before the end of 2021. Now, this would be a very interesting scenario, politically very tricky situation for the Conservatives to play. Because let's look at the two scenarios. Now, neither scenario has the blessing of the Conservative government in Westminster, of course. Nobody is saying that such a referendum, if triggered unilaterally by the Scottish Parliament, would be binding, though clearly it should be. And I don't know it's not. Again, I would like to see the Scotland Act actually tested in a constitutional court. But anyway, at the moment, people are of the view that the Scottish Parliament wouldn't be able to unilaterally just trigger such a referendum. But I mean, I don't know whether that is or is not the case. But it's that lack of blessing from the Conservatives that would play into the SNP's hands. Even if they didn't expect anything to come of it immediately, it's almost win-win for them. In two ways. Well, I say that. Realistically. See, the first scenario is this. So it means that they can say that Westminster government are ignoring the wishes of the Scottish people. If Westminster don't give it their blessing, they can say, look, they don't want you to have your say. It's this English Parliament, again, not letting the people of Scotland have their say. If this happens, they'll have just voted, bear in mind, for a majority Scottish Parliament that is pro-independence, if they get that majority. That's what I mean. If they don't get the majority, it weakens their position. That would increase support for their cause still further. The second thing is that it means the Conservatives, if they won't give it their blessing, can't really full-bloodedly, actively campaign strongly, because that would mean giving it credence. But anyway, the two scenarios, because those are just two little features. So that in the first scenario, the Conservatives dismiss it as a political stunt and don't engage. That leaves the Scottish Conservatives to campaign for the Remain vote. Without the full might of a well-funded campaign, there is little prospect of reversing the current majority, polling to be in favour of independence. For those who think, oh, you know, there's been this growing trend in favour of independence, it's been a majority for over a year now, you have to look at it this way. The only party that's really talking about it a lot is the SNP. So at the moment, that public debate is all one-sided. And if it remains one-sided, then it's very likely that this advisory referendum would result in that as well. The polls wouldn't significantly change. You know, if it's carried out by the Scottish Government with the Scottish Parliament's votes, and that's all it needs to be is an advisory referendum, just a testing of the water, no one's saying it has to trigger anything, and it returns a majority for independence, that would be massive political pressure for Westminster to take it seriously. Anything else will only strengthen the case for independence till it becomes deafening and you've lost it. So then you have your second scenario. You want to avoid that first scenario, like the plague, if you pardon the expression. Now, this is where the Conservatives actually pump a load of money into their dodgy strategists and mastermind a campaign that reverses the current trend. And again, at the moment, for people who'll be thinking, oh no, they'll not do that. There is no one campaigning for the Remain vote at the moment because there is no votes to be had. Don't imagine it wouldn't work. The Conservatives, even under Boris Johnson, always take one thing deadly seriously. Boris Johnson takes very little seriously. One thing he does, that is campaigns. And they get the best people to run them. Not always the most honest either. And you know what? They listen to those strategists. They do what they say because they know it's important. No, it's vital, in fact. Now, you might wonder, all right, what happened in the Brexit referendum of 2016? David Cameron campaigned for Remain. That wasn't a Conservative campaign. Much of the Conservative funding went into the Leave campaign. They know what they're doing. But if they do this and they win the advisory referendum, then they could shut down the moves. You know, absolute bargain. They should do that. That's why they should. I mean, bear in mind, Johnson's advisors last year told him to agree to the referendum. They told him to agree. But Johnson obviously fears supporting the move. So he doesn't look like doing what would be necessary to actually win the campaign. But he's very likely to lose it badly if he doesn't. You know, it creates a hugely tricky political scenario for the Conservatives. But it also creates a whole host of other political problems, not least of which is how Labour play it. You know, they need to start making inroads against the Conservatives again this year and not let them slip this time. This move by the SNP isn't guaranteed to hinder that, but it could well do so if played right. And even if it's, even if Labour do get their strategy right on it, it could still be a bit of a banana skin. Not that I expect Scottish nationalists to have much sympathy with that. But yes, interesting times, like Brexit. Truly terrifying, but undoubtedly interesting. But those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, please also click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.